I don't know.
Right.
I give myself too much.
Mr. Thomas, he's very, oh.
Shushed you already. You put up with that?
Good.
Unfortunately, that's
So we might have to look at that. I started
I had to get you before you got me.
I'm totally, completely speechless.
We got a minute and a half tomorrow.
I didn't know what to say.
If we can get through the public hearing.
That could be a pretty cool project.
Good evening and welcome to the August 15th work session of the Richmond Community Schools Board of School Trustees. If you would all join me for the pledge to the flag.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. So, as is our custom, if we could have the reading of the mission statement.
Richmond Community Schools guides students on pathways of learning to a future of limitless possibilities.
And our vision.
Richmond Community Schools, a community nurturing mind, body, and spirit to prepare students for lives of choice, purpose, and service.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
And hopefully, we keep, since we've repeated it, we will keep that in the back of our mind as we're making these other decisions.
Sounds good to me.
Our next item on the agenda is our public commentary.
No?
So we will move on to our consent items.
Okay, our consent items for your consideration tonight are 3.01, the approval of minutes, 3.02, human resources, including the addendum at your desk, and then 3.03, our Title I grant.
Okay, do you have a motion to approve the consent items?
I move to approve the consent items with the addendum.
Motion from Aaron Stevens. Do I have a second? A second. Second from Dixie Robinson. Do you have any comments or questions on the consent items? Hearing none, all those in favor of the approving the consent items signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so this is where I have to get my. So, which one of these is my script? Oh, here we go. Okay, so, I'm sorry, I'm gonna trip anyway. You tried to prepare me. Do I need to close this
We'll
meeting
suspend
first?
the
Suspend the meeting, I don't
current
need a
meeting.
vote for it, okay. So, we're going to suspend the current meeting, and I'm going to open the public hearing. And we do not need a vote for that, so we're gonna open the public hearing, and we are turning it over to you to start.
Actually, we're going to turn it over to Karen.
To Karen.
Yep.
Okay, very good. You tried.
Sorry.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, this evening is the designated time to open our public hearing on the facility planning projects the board has been discussing over the time period of quite a few months now in preparation for the possibility of issuing bonds, and that public hearing is a statutory obligation under IC Code 20-267, and it is a code that tells us that a school corporation which plans to spend more than $1 million to build, repair, or alter a school building, that it would be financed. It must hold a public hearing at which explanations of the potential value of the project to the school corporation and the community are provided, and the hearing is open to the public for comment. So at this time, we'll go over the planning stages for what we're looking at with our facilities and the possibility of bond issuance this year. So first we'll touch base on who our stakeholders are. Our taxpayers, first and foremost. our students and our families and our staff, as well as our community members. So our district encompasses Boston Township, Town of Boston, Town of Spring Grove, Wayne Township, Wayne Sanitary Township, and the City of Richmond. The board determined that we would set some guiding principles as we discussed projects and the financing of those projects. And first and foremost, that one of those principles was to provide a steady tax rate. The board determined that it wanted to see no additional rate to our taxpayers. We also wanted to look at building needs that had been deferred due to a lack of resources from our capital projects fund. Circuit breaker credits do affect us tremendously, and we lose a lot of revenue to them. They're great for taxpayers. They're really hard on the taxing unit. So we have had to defer some needs that had previously been a part of our capital plan, and we wanted to look at those and address some of those as well. We wanted the projects that we discussed to be visible to our students, our staff, and our public. We wanted infrastructure to be a portion of the projects, and that is to maintain the community's investment in what we're doing. And then we also wanted a minimum of one major project. So the financials involved in this project plan are that we are looking at issuing general obligation bonds. The time period in which those bonds would be repaid would be anywhere from 6 years to 10 years. 6 year being our estimate, but 10 years being our maximum term. The principal amount would be $5 million, which would provide our taxpayers with a steady rate for their taxes. So there would not be an increase to the tax rate with all other variables being equal under this preliminary plan. As a part of that $5 million, you have to break down what those costs would look like to the bond, and $125,000 of that would be the actual cost of issuance of the bond, and that would leave $4,875,000 to actually put toward project hard and soft costs. So what we have been doing is we have been working with to provide us with some financial information as we plan out this bond and any future facility planning. We wanted to take a look at what our options were, what things the board could do. And in doing that, we also wanted to look at how that would affect our taxpayers on their tax bills. And at this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Belvia Gray of HJ Umball, and she will go over an illustrative tax bill as well as provide some additional information on the financials associated with this plan.
Good evening, everyone. As Karen said, I'm Belvia Gray with Umball, and we've been working with you to help plot out how if you issue debt, if you approve the bonds tonight, how will you pay for it? One of the things that Karen mentioned as the guiding principle is wanting to have a steady tax rate. And while the school can control what it does with its tax rate to some extent, you really don't have control over what's happening with the city or the county or other units of government. So we did provide an illustrative tax bill example, but keep in mind that there's a lot of different things that could change it, but we're comparing, what the school would do from year to year here. And so this sheet here calculates what the illustrative impact would be for different types of property. So we looked at property subject to the 1% tax cap, property subject to the 2% tax cap, and property subject to the 3% tax cap. And I'm trying to see if I can, maybe here? Okay. I'm trying to think which one would be the best for everyone to look at. Maybe the one back here, so as I walk through this. Okay. I'm gonna do the pointer over here. Okay, so the top of the sheet here calculates the assessed valuation. So we look at the gross assessed value. We used $100,000 for all types of properties just to have the same gross assessment. And that would be for a homestead type property, that is reflective of the market value of a property, so what you might expect to get through a sale. Homestead properties also get different types of deductions that aren't available to agricultural, rental, commercial types of properties. So those deductions are listed here. So for a home that's valued at about $100,000, they're really paying taxes on about $33,000, so $32,750 of assessed value. So I like to show that because sometimes taxpayers, it's important for them to see, you know, what the assessment is on their home, but also there's a lower amount that they're actually paying taxes on. The bottom part of this sheet then shows what the tax bill calculation would look like. And so the line here, this shows the tax rate of, and we're just showing Richmond City, Wayne Township in this example, but it shows what the total district tax rate is. So that includes the school, it includes the county, the township, the library, the city, includes all of the other overlapping districts. The second line here includes the school, and then the debt service is separated out here. So you arrive at the total tax rate that's on this line. Taxes are paid per $100 of assessed valuation, so we make that calculation. And then as Karen mentioned, we do have tax caps in Indiana, and so that does limit the amount that a taxpayer can pay. So the gross taxes due that are calculated on this line right here are then compared to the maximum amount that that taxpayer can pay. So in this case, for a $100,000 home, the most that taxpayer can pay is $1,000. And so the taxpayer will receive a credit of $197, so they're not going to pay more than $1,000. And so that $197 then results in a loss to all of the units that provide service to that individual taxpayer. So I thought this would be helpful. We're showing it based upon your 2018, and then the 2019, that assumes that the school keeps its rate steady, its current debt service rate steady with where it is currently, and that would also reflect the issuance of bonds should you choose to move forward. Are there any questions on the tax bill calculation before I go into the specific finances for this proposed issuance? I think I'm going to get this right, Karen. Okay, perfect. All right. I know I've shared this information at other meetings, but since we're here in the public hearing, I'll walk through everything again, albeit maybe a little bit more quickly, as I don't see any members of the public here this evening. Okay. This first schedule right here, this shows the school corporation's current existing lease rental payments. You have debt that's currently repaid through budget year 2019, which is really part of the impetus for you having some of the discussions that you've been having, is because you have debt that will be fully repaid next year. And so it really is providing an opportunity for the school to take care of some of the needs that you have without increasing rates over current levels. This next schedule then shows for the school corporation the amount of indebtedness that can exist in its own name. And so that calculation here is a little under 6.9 million. We're looking at issuing $5 million of general obligation debt. So that would leave you with about 1.9 million. And as general obligation debt is repaid, the capacity then gets increased over time. So you can see up here the above calculation, the actual total limit is about 9.5 million. You currently have some pension bonds that are outstanding of 2.6 million, so that reduces the amount you have available as a general obligation borrowing. Karen mentioned that we did include the breakdown of hard and soft project costs and cost of issuance in the legal documents, and those are already included in the documents that you have there. This schedule right here just has some of the details specific to the financing at hand. Right now, we are currently anticipating a repayment term of 6 years. We did include 10 years in the legal documents just to provide flexibility. But like I said, we're fully anticipating that the debt will be repaid within 6 years. Total interest cost we're showing of $650,000. That is based upon interest rates that are about 1% higher than current market rates. So we used interest rates of about 3.7% based upon current market. We're at about 2.7 or so percent. And again, we do that because you're establishing maximum parameters through this process that you can come down from, but you can't exceed. So we want to make sure we built in flexibility there. Also included in the resolutions that you'll have for approval this evening is a maximum tax rate, and that's just part of what's statutorily required. And that is based upon the maximum payment, and that rate is equal to 9.19 cents. But because we are replacing debt that will be repaid with this new debt, we're expecting that there won't be any increase over current levels. And one other piece, you can see it all pulled together here. While we're showing a payment that is higher in 2019, it's the plan of the school to utilize a portion of its operating balance to offset the payment in 2019. And we'll be working with Karen to make sure that the payment is structured such that you're utilizing that operating balance. And so a question you might have, or a question the public might have is, well, why are you spending down this operating balance? And the reason for that is the debt that you currently have outstanding is allowed to have an operating balance of 50%. So it's basically allowed to have a half a year's worth of payment. And there was a change in the law in 2014 that only allows a 15% operating balance. And so because we're keeping payments at the same level, there's a spend down of that operating balance that has to occur. And so the school has the opportunity to issue debt maybe a little bit earlier than it would have otherwise to take advantage of that spend down, because otherwise there would be a fluctuation in your overall tax rate. So that's why we're showing the payment there in 2019. And the way that we're currently structuring the bonds, and this structure is still, it is still subject to change. We won't need to finalize the structure until probably about a month to 6 weeks prior to issuance of the bonds. But this is just one option that has your payments really at around the same level through 2020. And then we have created a stare down. So that would provide the school opportunity, time to consider other projects that you may have as part of a longer term facility plan. And that will give you the opportunity to decide if, maybe you think in a couple of years you might have some additional projects that you'll want to consider. But like I said, that is certainly subject to change, depending on what your needs might be. Okay, and this I think is just showing the same information that we had before. So I think that's all I have on the financing. I'm going to turn it back over to Karen.
Are there any questions for Velvia before we move on?
Yes.
Just for clarity, using the 1% homestead with the $100,000, the standard deduction, normally don't they stay the same for the higher value? So they couldn't take that amount and roll it into 2,000 or 200,000 or 300,000. The amount that the homeowner would be taxable for would actually, when you exceed the homestead credit, would actually go up on a $200,000 home to $130,000.
That's a very good question. So there's two components to that standard, that homestead type deduction. The first is the standard deduction, and that is the lesser of $45,000 or 60% of the gross assessment of a property. And then as a part of that, if you're eligible for the homestead, you're also eligible for the supplemental homestead deduction. And that is what they do is they take the gross assessed value less the standard deduction. They take that amount of assessed value. And for the first $600,000 of assessed value, you get a 35% credit. And then anything over and above $600,000, you get a 25% credit. So the standard, as long as you have a house valued at more than $75,000, $80,000 or so, you'll get that $45,000 that's flat. But then the supplemental homestead deduction, that will increase as the value of one's property is higher.
So a $200,000 home, then if we had to just throw a number out there, the tax rate would be based on 110,000?
For a $200,000 property?
Yeah, I was just trying to understand the ratio there.
Well, it's not really a perfect ratio. You just have to do the calculation per home value, because of that supplemental homestead deduction, so it's not linear.
Right. I just wanted somebody to understand if they're sitting in a $200,000 home or a $300,000 home, they couldn't take this and just multiply it by 3.
Correct.
No.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right.
Right, and
Yeah,
it's-
it is because of the supplemental
Right.
homestead deduction, because it's a percentage of value.
The homestead assumes you have no more than 1 acre in your homestead, so any excess acreage or other types of outbuildings or pools, what have you, improvements, you just can't take the AV and multiply by .01 and
Right,
always
exactly.
assume that's gonna be the cap limit.
And if someone wanted to see that, they could look at their property record card, and that very clearly details out, what's subject to the 1%, 2%, or 3% cap, and then they could make those same calculations based on that.
Well, and that's why I just wanted to point that out for those people who are watching it or will be watching this. And the other thing is, you picked a township in the city of Richmond. Like me, my taxes are different because I'm in the fringe.
I think you have
So,
Right.
so there is some difference.
And
And I'm
what
just
we-
saying that for the public.
Yeah.
Oh,
and-
sure.
And for the public, we actually had already discussed this in prior meetings, and we had asked UMBA to prepare a tax bill for each of our taxing units. That will go up on our website, along with the other information for the public, once we move on to future steps, should that occur.
Yeah, that's a great question, though.
Because I love the term, no additional rate. I love that term.
Well, and there's a lot of factors that go into that.
Yeah.
Anything
Any
else
other
for me?
questions?
No, that's it, thank you
Okay,
for me.
thank you.
All right. Thank you, Belvia. All right, so as we continue to move through the presentation, we will be looking now at the actual projects that the board has been discussing. And if I might take our public back to March of 2017, we began with some public meetings that provided the opportunity for our public to tell us and the board exactly what you wanted to see. As we discussed future planning, whether that be facility needs or even programmatic. So this is simply the first phase of that. And this is strictly some facility projects. The board will continue to have discussions on future planning, but today this is just the first phase. So we have been working through what that looks like. The board provided a project committee in which the committee met a couple of times to look over the possibility of what those needs were that could meet the guiding principles. And they have come up with a plan that provides projects that actually targeted and hit every one of the guiding principles that the board had tasked the committee with undertaking. So I am going to turn this portion of the presentation over to Mr. Tidrow, and he will go through what projects are discussed in the plan.
Thank you. So as Ms. Goff mentioned, these are the plans that we have discussed. We've talked about them before, but we'll just go through them. They're organized in about 5 different categories here. And so I'll go over those once again. Safety and security is a main concern of our organization. Make sure our students and staff, community are safe in our buildings, and our buildings are safe. But we also want to look at ways to enhance that security when we can. And as we've gone through other renovations, we've enhanced the entrances to some of our elementaries, to our intermediates and so forth. with some projects we've discussed in the projects committee, we looked at Crestdale, Star, Vale, Westview, Charles, Fairview, and Community Youth Services, or Baxter, to do some upgrades to our entrances there for that safety and security model. And I'm just going to mention some numbers here as we've estimated some costs up in the top right-hand corner of our slide. We estimated about $750,000 for that area. We'll move to student life, and this is where we looked at ways that we could enhance that real student involvement in our buildings. And one way is to look at how we can renovate some of our historic libraries, whether it's the one at the high school. Some of us actually used the library over there at the high school, the old library as a library, myself included. And we use that as a kind of an attendance area and an area for some of our assistant principals. But we'd like to renovate that, make it a place for our students, kind of a meeting place, enhance that area. We're looking at dentists, intermediate, and tests to do similar things in their media centers. We like to talk about old traditions, keeping the old traditions, but creating new traditions as well, bringing these areas up to kind of the digital age, make sure our students get what they need to advance to the next stage in their life. We're looking at a gymnasium floor replacement at Charles Elementary. Right now, that gym floor is carpeted, and it's a nice floor, but we would like to do a synthetic floor there, as we've done in some other places. We look at our outside activity areas, whether it's basketball courts, our running tracks at our middle schools, and then look at some playground improvements and updates at Charles. So again, just some estimates on those costs. We looked at about $735,000 for those projects. It's the one area we could talk about being one of the major projects would be in the area of roofing. We're always looking to make sure that our roofs are tight. Dennis Intermediate School needs a partial replacement, but that partial is a lot of areas. So we're talking about a major roof job there. And then looking at Crestdale to do some upgrades there where we tied in the old building during the renovation to a new area there. We need to make sure that that's tight. A little over $1 million is an estimate on those projects. And then in an area we classified as public access enhancements. This would include discussing putting in an elevator in our Tiernan Center, which is at the high school. Currently, the nearest elevator to get to the second floor is in the high school proper, which is down around what we call the Four Corners. So you can get to the second floor, it just might take a while. So we want to put something in the Tiernan Center that will be useful and immediate for our patrons there. We have needs out of our bus lot for more asphalt to put down over the land there to ensure our buses stay in better shape. Right now we have gravel and dirt, which in Indiana that means potholes, and so it's not a safe environment for our vehicles as well as our bus drivers and other employees. We also have a project that we've looked at for adding some sidewalks, replacing some sidewalk area at our Vale Elementary to enhance that area. Again, a little over $1 million for those projects. And then an area that we've talked about a lot, as we've talked about our needs over the past year or so, whether it's in our other buildings or the high school. This would focus on our other buildings, but some mechanical operations that are needed. This goes to the chillers at Test, Westview, Vale, a boiler upgrade at Dennis Intermediate. At Crestdale, we're in need of some controls to help control that temperature and so forth in the classrooms. and then some lighting upgrades, mainly at our high school, again, at the Tiernan Center, whether it's on the main floor or up in the balcony there, and also lighting needs around the district. Here, we estimated about 1.3 million for those projects. So, and that is an overview of the projects. Any questions? If not, thank you. I'll turn it back to Karen Scow.
Okay, so we have presented you with the options that we've been discussing here amongst the board, and the public now has the opportunity for questions. This evening, we do not have any public members with us, so we do hope that you take the time to review this information and look at it. The board has taken a lot of time to ensure that the projects that are being taken upon for discussion are needed and will enhance our facilities in every area, both elementary, intermediate, and high school, as well as just general maintenance that's been needed for years. So we are ready then to make a recommendation that we close this public hearing, and
For the record, you need to invite the public comment, even though there's no public here.
Yeah, okay.
The media's here, they may have.
Okay, do we have any public comment? Okay,
Hold on.
all right, sorry, I apologize, this is my first
Thank
time.
you.
All right, so I'll now make the recommendation that we close the public hearing and resume the previous board meeting.
I'd like to entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Thank you, Jeffrey. Motion from Jeff to, oh, yes.
And just one thing, although it should be part of the minutes, the record of the public hearing, we do have proof of publication of the notice of the public hearing that'll be incorporated into the minutes of the public hearing.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. So we have a motion from Jeff to close the public hearing. Do we have a second? Second from Brad. I think comments and questions probably, if you have any comments on that?
The one question I had is under mechanical operations, do we need to put underneath there as far as lighting, that the PA system was also gonna be addressed in that? Or does that all fall under lighting?
There are additional details that will happen with each project as steps progress. One thing to note to the public is the project listing is for a full $5 million. The amount available for projects with hard and soft costs is 4.875. So this is the project plan. Should estimates and costs come in better than expected, we'll be able to do more, but it is possible that the project list before you will be reduced in order to meet funds. But there are additional details that will come with the projects once further design and detail are provided. At this time, this was an overview of the projects at hand.
Will the board determine those projects that are cut, if some are cut?
I would assume
Yes.
that would be the case.
We will definitely bring that back to the board as we look at what the estimates when they come in, the planning stage of that, and
My guess is we'll have more money than what's on the project list.
boy, I hope so.
It's optimistic. It's an optimistic moment. Awesome.
I almost bet we will.
I think that's,
Sharpen
that
that
would be-
pencil and
that'd be
And really,
fantastic.
that's the reason for the generality in the projects.
Right.
In issuing a general obligation bond, the type of project is what is important, and it will provide us a little bit of flexibility should that occur where we do have some funds.
Yeah, we talked a bit about that.
In
And we
previous
kind of wrestled
meetings.
with that, what categories were we gonna call them and that sort of thing, so that we
Right.
did have some flexibility with that, so that's good.
Right.
Okay, all those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, so then our next order of business is the resolution for the projects, yes?
Yes. So going into our action items this evening, we have 5 action items that are all related to the projects that we just discussed in the public hearing. So I'm going to ask Karen if she would just work through each of these as we go through the next 5 action items. Karen?
Okay, and I'm going to rely on Mr. Cross if I speak out of turn or additional information needs to be stated,
I'm
to
sure
just
you'll be
jump right in. But the first action item before you tonight is a project resolution recommendation, and the project resolution has been provided to the board for review. It is after the public hearing. The resolution is available for consideration. This resolution will be posted after approval, should it be approved by the board. But do I need to read the resolution?
It's
or
been
how does
posted,
it-
though. You don't, it's not necessary to read it.
Okay,
But
Okay.
the resolution is intended to be the culmination of the focal points of the public, of the 1028 hearing we just had, so.
Yep.
And I think all of the findings were adequately supported by the presentation made by Ms. Scoff and Mr. Tidrow.
so tonight, it is my recommendation and the administration's recommendation that the board approve the project resolution as presented.
All right, do I have a motion? Motion from Aaron
I move to
Stevens.
approve the project resolution recommendation.
Very good. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Jeff Slifer. Any further comments or questions? I appreciate all the work that went into this, and I'm pretty excited about the list.
Agreed.
Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the project resolution as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Very good.
Okay. The next agenda item is the preliminary bond resolution. And this resolution is a statement that finds that the present facilities of the school corporation are not adequate to provide proper educational environment of the students now attending or who will attend its schools, and that the board finds that there are not sufficient funds available in its existing tax levies with which to pay the cost of the renovation improvements needed to the facilities throughout the corporation that have been presented tonight through the public hearing. The costs of the project include equipment, technology, and site improvements, and it is a preliminary resolution in which it states that the school corporation should issue bonds in an amount not to exceed $5 million for the purpose of providing the funds to be applied for these projects, and that the bonds in such maximum amount should now be authorized by the board. So it is my recommendation that the board, and the recommendation of the administration, the board approves the preliminary bond resolution as it has been presented.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the bond resolution as presented?
I will motion to approve it as presented.
Very good.
I will second it.
All right, we have a motion from Brad, a second from Debbie. Any comments or questions? All right, all those in favor of approving the resolution as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Okay, the next action item is the declaration of official intent to reimburse expenditures. And this is a declaration in which the board will provide the administration with the authorization to reimburse expenditures that will be necessary to incur on behalf of the school corporation in an amount not to exceed $5 million as the board and the school corporation intends to finance the renovation of and improvements to school facilities throughout the corporation. It is my recommendation that the board approve the declaration of an official intent to reimburse expenditures as presented.
Do I have a motion?
I
Dixie
move that-
Robinson?
That we approve the declaration.
Do I have a
I'll
second?
second.
Second from Debbie Moore. Any comments or questions on this? Yes.
I was not, the declaration of reimbursing expenditures, so is that because we're the middle person here? Or are we talking soft cost, or are we talking reimbursement for soft cost from what started before the project?
It can be a lot of costs you might have, that you might incur. Obviously, I can see that you may have to incur some design fees before, the timing of a GO bond versus a lease financing is a little different, so, Belvia can explain it a little better perhaps, but this is, I call it kind of like a comfort resolution. It shows a level of inducement that you're expecting monies to come in, You're going to incur expenses in reliance, you may incur expenses in reliance on those bond receipts. If you have expenses you've advanced and you choose not to use the bond proceeds, that's fine. If it's otherwise a permissible expenditure from the fund and by which you choose to pay those expenses. But this just creates a paper trail, if you will, that you're expecting, and you don't need to articulate what they are, but you're expecting that there may be expenses attendant to the project, including its financing through the issuance of GO bonds, that you will incur and from which you would like to be reimbursed from the proceeds of those bonds.
So that would be like an architectural fee?
It could easily be that.
Start working on
You know, it
project.
depends on the timing of the construction versus the timing of the receipt of the bonds.
Okay. The only thing that, in relation to this then, is I expect that, I know Humboldt and Ice Miller and all, I know they're not working for free, but I would like to have a breakdown of the soft cost of the project as we go through. But by us approving this declaration, then it's going to be an internal decision from you guys on what to reimburse from the bond proceeds and what isn't.
What I would expect as we move forward in this project is that we would have periodic financial updates and project updates to be sure, just with status of what expected costs are or where bids have come in. As the bond gets closer, we will have more information on how much those costs of issuance areas are, and we'll be able to detail that out for the board. So I would definitely expect that the board is always in the know.
We can
as
give
to
you
what's
a
happening.
fairly educated estimate, barring something unforeseen as to the soft cost of issuance. Project cost, that I can't speak to architects and their fees. Right.
Really, I mean, it's really just a bridge from today until you get bond proceeds. So we're assuming, I think, November closing on the bonds. So to the extent there's any fees that we pay from that, our fee, Ron's fee, Ice Miller's fee, we wait until closing to get paid for any of those. But there may be some initial expenses, and rather than issuing the bonds before really the bulk of the money needs to be spent, this is just a way to kind of defer, let the school pay for some of those upfront costs, then you get reimbursed out of the bond proceeds if you need to.
Just a temporary fund to transfer
Yeah,
money.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And this is customary really for all general obligation bonds. This is a customary resolution.
Good enough, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the declaration of official intent to reimburse expenditures signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Very good.
Okay.
Next.
The next action item is permission to advertise the notice of determination to issue bonds pursuant to IC codes 6-1.1-20-5. The Board of School Trustees must notice the taxpayers of the district that it has preliminarily determined to issue bonds in an aggregate amount not to exceed $5 million to fund the proposal provided tonight for renovation of and improvements to school facilities throughout the school corporation. The notice will be published August 22nd and August 29th, 2018 in the Richmond Palladium item, and will be posted in 3 public areas not later than August 22nd. Tonight, it's my recommendation that the board authorize the publication and notice and posting of the notice of determination to issue bonds as it has been presented.
I so move.
We have a motion from Jeff for permission to advertise the notice of determination to issue bonds. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Aaron. Do I have any other comments or questions? Hearing none. All those in favor of granting permission to advertise signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Okay.
0.05.
As we move on, tonight we request permission to advertise notice of public hearing for additional appropriation. As required by the Department of Local Government Finance, the Board of School Trustees must notice the taxpayers of the district that it intends to hold a public hearing on September 12th, 2018 at 5:30 p.m. in the Administration Building of Richmond Community Schools to consider an additional appropriation of the bonds which the board determined to issue. The additional appropriation in the amount of $5 million is in addition to all appropriations provided for in the existing budget and tax levy. The notice will be published August 22nd, 2018 in the Richmond Palladium item. It is my recommendation that the board authorize the publication of the notice of public hearing for additional appropriation as it has been presented.
Do I have a motion to grant permission to advertise the public hearing.
Yes.
From Debbie Moore. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Jeff Slifer. Any comments or questions on this action? Hearing none. All those in favor of granting permission to advertise the notice of the public hearing for additional appropriations signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Before we move on, Bellevue, we thank you for being here tonight and all your work that went into this, and Ron and Karen as well, and Rob, I know you guys, and the board members for your work on the project was great job. Appreciate all your efforts.
It's, that's exciting, I think. We've waited a while
We have.
and worked
Feels
very
good.
hard to stay steady.
Yep.
So I think that's fantastic.
Feels good. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next action item this evening is 5.06, and that is our school improvement plans. And I'm going to ask Dr. Reynolds if he would speak to that, please.
Awesome, thank you, Mr. Terrell. For your approval this evening, I bring the school improvement plans for all elementary schools, the intermediate buildings, and Richmond High School for approval. I think it's important to note that once the I-STEP data is available and released, plans will be amended to include that updated data prior to the final submission to the Indiana Department of Education. Once finalized, school improvement plans will be posted to each of the schools' websites. Really, as a side note, if you had the opportunity to review those plans closely, you'll see the addition of Orton Gillingham. That expanded to all schools, that opportunity, and you'll see an emphasis or an addition of technology in those as well.
And Orton Gillingham is?
Orton Gillingham is a literacy. It's not really a program, but it's a literacy instructional methodology that you can overlay on top of anything. Really sensory-based way of teaching literacy. It's really interactive. In fact, Mrs. Phillips at Fairview was tweeting about it today. She was doing some of the things that she had acquired at Orton Gillingham. But
Now, how different is that from the Literacy Collaborative? Because as I was reading through it and thinking about the group instruction, I'm sitting there thinking, well, we're going back to the Literacy Collaborative.
well, I think the best way to separate it is the Literacy Collaborative is a program and resources, and I would say that Orton Gillingham is really a literacy instructional strategies.
But it uses the same kind of benchmarking, doesn't it?
Some of it.
Yeah, I kind of chuckled to myself as I
You're
was
like,
reading that
that's
because
old as new.
it kind of seemed like, okay, now we're going full circle.
Yeah.
The beauty of it, as I'm looking again, not an
Yes, it is a
expert,
good thing.
is the idea of being able to overlay that over whatever.
Anything,
Is that, I think that's the beauty of it, that,
It was
from a non-expert.
Yeah, it was nice to see some of this. I mean, it's really
Three public places you're gonna post.
the intent, in most cases, is that it's an elementary based, but it's really good for all levels. Last year, and what kind of prompted this year's push for some of the secondaries to attend is a team from the high school went over and watched a classroom at Star.
Nice.
Used the program and got folks excited about it. So we had some good participation from the secondaries too.
I like that. Okay, so,
I approve I make the motion that we approve the school improvement plan.
that's what I was getting to. So we have a motion from
What's your vote
Jeff
gonna be?
Slifer and a second from Aaron Stevens. And does anyone else have any questions on the school improvement plans?
Just appreciate the highlighting. I don't know if the test had the most changes, but there was clearly highlighted. And when you're reviewing them, it makes it much simpler.
Yeah. I'll pass that along. Absolutely. Thank you.
Very good. So all those in favor of approving the school improvement plans signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Okay, our next action item is 5.07, and that is the request to increase the adult meal prices. And I'm going to ask Mr. Tidrow if he would speak to this, please.
All right. Thank you. So as you know, this school year, we're eligible for what's called the Community Eligibility Provision, which allows us to offer free breakfast and free lunches to all of our students. That doesn't mean we're out of the business of collecting some money when people need some meals, and we are required to look at our adult meal prices. So if an adult requests a breakfast or lunch, we do charge them. And we have to make sure that those charges are high enough so our meals are not supported by any kind of reimbursable amounts that we get from the federal government from that revenue. So Mrs. LaRue, our food service coordinator, she was right on it. She did the calculations, and it showed that we do need to increase. And in the what I posted, I have a proposed adult meal price calculation here. Our current prices for breakfast is $2. The proposed price would be, new price would be $2.50. For lunch, our current price is $3.50, and we propose that we increase that to $3.75. The recommendation tonight is that the Board of School Trustees approve the request to increase adult meal prices as presented.
Do I have a motion to approve the increase in adult meal prices?
I move that we approve.
Dixie Robinson makes the motion.
I'll second.
Debbie Moore makes the second. Any comments or questions about this? It's kind of self-explanatory. All those in favor of approving the increase to adult meal prices signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Very good.
Right, our next action item this evening is 5.08, and that is an overnight field trip. Dr. Reynolds?
Yes, thank you. I'm asking for approval this evening for the Richmond High School girls golf team under the direction of Caleb Snyder to participate in an overnight field trip to Maryville, Indiana. They're participating in a tournament in Maryville. It's quite the drive, so I'm just asking for approval overnight to Maryville, Indiana for the girls golf team.
Do I have a motion to approve the
I will
overnight
motion
trip?
to approve that.
Motion from Brad. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Aaron Stevens. Any comments or questions about this trip?
They're off to a heck of a start.
That is the truth. He's doing a great job
Go
with that
girls.
group.
The chaperones in addition to the coach, I take it.
Yeah.
All those in favor of approving the overnight field trip as presented signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And now we are to our work session.
Okay, for our work session tonight, we'd like to discuss our master planning working groups, much like the project group that worked this summer based on the information that we received over the last school year and put together the list that we approved tonight. We'd like to, at this point in time, begin moving forward, looking at the different working groups and 5 different areas that came about from the discussions that we had with our public, with our stakeholders, with our faculty and staff members. And one of the working groups is finance group, which actually Mr. Slifer, as you brought up tonight, would be the perfect example of what they would do in that finance group, would be keeping up with what those costs are, working through that, looking at that, bringing information back to the board. So the information that you have in front of you, we broke down the information that we received from the community discussions over the last year, and looked at intermediate curriculum offerings, intermediate grade level configuration, high ability programming, along with the alternative education programming, finance, and then also facilities, building projects, and of course looking at the high school and the remodeling that needs to take place there. So the information you have in front of you is, we divided that up with both central office administrators and then also building administrators. What we'd like to do tonight is to see from all of you if there are board members that would like to participate and be a part of these different working groups so that we can begin working on this. What we'd like to do is to have meetings beginning possibly as soon as the end of August here, September, October, November, and then hopefully in December bringing a recommendation to the board so we can spend the spring semester preparing for whatever those changes may be. So at this time, I'd just like to open that up for discussion from all of you to get your feelings on that. And then also, hopefully tonight, you can let me know what working groups you'd like to be a part of as well.
I think it's very important for us to be involved in these groups. So it really shouldn't be a question of whether we're doing it, it's just sort of needs to be a question of how are we going to participate in each one, and splitting us up to do that.
Can we be a part of more than one?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay.
We do have to watch,
So our
do we have to watch our
participation,
number of people, or are we?
Ron, you want to advise on that, as
think
far
so
as the
on
number of board members who can be a
Committees.
part of each working group? Does that need to be 3? Does it need to?
If it's a board-appointed committee, then 2 implicates the open door law. If it's superintendent appointed, using volunteers from the board, then that doesn't implicate the open door law if there are fewer than a majority.
Okay. So, I would say that we would come from, this being the superintendent groups. So, from what I understand, then it would be as long as there's not 4, 3 or fewer on each. And it doesn't have to be as many as 3, but it can be.
I guess I kind of would like to kind of back up a little bit. We originally were going to plan, and it was mentioned in the update, we originally was going to plan a board retreat
Mm-hmm.
oh, good.
to discuss our next steps. So we got the presentation of the master plan from the superintendent and administrators, but I don't know that we got to a point, and I haven't had the chance to go back and look at my notes, so that's on me, but did we approve the master plan? Or, I guess I was kind of wondering, well, the reason why I'm asking the question is, there's some directions that there's been some consideration that grade level configurations, for example. Or, but on here, it's only listed intermediate grade level. So, I guess my question is, at least from my perspective, there seems to be a kind of a disconnect from where we left off to where we're at now.
Okay.
Now, I'm not trying to say that in any bad way at all.
Sure.
But I'm trying to also make sure that, everything that we approved tonight was the board, the board, the board, the board. So we need to make sure that this master plan is the board.
Well, and correct me if I'm not speaking what you're thinking, but I kind of see this as that next step. Like, we pushed ourselves a little bit to try to fit a retreat in. We knew we needed working groups.
But we don't have an outline written. I'll shut up.
Well,
I'm sorry.
No,
I think
no.
these working groups are what will help us get to the outline. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I also would suggest to you that with this being the work session, that as we go through that, I think that's a great point. And so if we need to alter this, if we want to add to this, whatever, I'm hoping that tonight we can accomplish some of what the intention was or what we had talked about in a retreat. Trying to look at the timing of a retreat is really challenging, but knowing that we need to keep moving forward with this. And so if there are things, by no means is this set that these are the only 5 or that they have to be exactly as they're written. Hopefully, the intention is that tonight that you will give us feedback, you'll provide me with feedback so that we can look and adjust, add to, take away as you would like.
Well,
It's a starting point. We have to have a starting point.
And this is our next step
I
toward.
totally understand we have to have a starting point, but when you're having meetings in public, it's hard sometimes to be out of the box and throw ideas out there without creating confusion or,
Panic.
thank you, that's the word, in the community. Whereas we're in
You
a
have no argument
retreat,
for me.
you do have the ability to talk a little bit more openly and throw some things out there that you necessarily wouldn't want to stick to the wall, but you want to consider.
Yeah, I concur.
So my only concern is that if these meetings are going to go on concurrently, whether it's these 5 groups or 3 groups or 7, my concern is that we have a thread from a common theme. So I just want to make sure that we have that outline first.
Sure.
Because I think if we don't go to these project meeting groups or these committees or with, here's an executive summary of what we're looking for, then I'm a little concerned that some of these may go awry.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying that you couldn't control that and, you know, and there's feedback and with board being involved, I mean, we maybe can create some steps and balances here, but I was, when I got it in your update, and you know, of course, it takes me a while sometimes to process, but, you know, I'm sitting thinking, I'm just gonna say I'm a little concerned. Because I just wanna make sure that, that this doesn't morph into what the committee come back and says, and the board has kind of put their back against the wall and say, now we have to do this.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, and I remember, and it's been a long time, I remember back when we did the master planning that we called Resources for Results, and we had these similar working groups where it was sort of think tanking around the themes that bubbled up from the public meetings. And so we're sort of on that same strain with this version of the master planning. But I get what you're saying, that, and you'll get no argument from me as far as being able to be creative and do those things, because the minute you say one configuration or another, you know, it causes concern for people. So it's really tough to have brainstorming.
You know, especially if we want to talk about, okay, do we have capacity? Do we want to close
Correct.
the building? Do we want to do
Yeah,
this?
yeah, because that gets people very,
Then
very
it
concerned.
gets people really
Sure,
upset,
sure,
and rightly
sure.
so. I mean, it make me nervous that
No
it
question.
directly affected me.
No question.
So,
So I guess-
although after looking at some of the capacities, I don't know how we can afford to close a building.
Yeah,
Because they seem
yeah.
to be all full capacity. But anyway, besides.
So the good news is that these, in my opinion, these themes, other than you could argue maybe we don't just talk about intermediate grade configuration, although the things that came up were primarily focused on intermediate, the ones that really stuck, although some of them at the lower end too.
It could blend into the elementary, it could blend into the high school.
Right, but it become intermediate level though. You see what I'm saying? 5, 6, 7, 8. That was the group.
I guess
that-
technically 2 through 11 is intermediate level.
Oh, that's a good point. But, so I get why you named it that, because it seemed to focus in from 5 to 8, where we were talking about, did we move them one way or the other way, or on their own, or split them up? That seemed to be where it focused. So I understand why they named it that, but we could change the name, obviously.
Well,
Finance,
but again, it's not so, like you said, it's not so important the name as,
what the task
here's the
is.
summary,
Yeah,
here's
yeah,
the
yeah,
task.
yeah.
Okay, group, we are charged with this.
Right, so, and then.
We just need to make sure they are charged
So
with it.
some walking papers basically kind of is what you're hoping that we could accomplish, and maybe that's the next step, and maybe we can squeeze it in on an off Wednesday really quick or something maybe. But then finance is a no-brainer, obviously. Building the projects and facilities is a no-brainer. To me, those subject areas
But the
aren't
finance
the
wouldn't,
issue.
you know, the finance would be about how our master plan is affected. It wouldn't be the $5 million bond we just approved.
That's correct. But it
So-
could have worked its
Yes,
way
but
in
but
as
it could
those.
bring back parts of that, for instance, like what are the soft costs? What do we need to, what are we fronting before we actually get the bonds to come through? What costs are we looking at that we want to keep? Go ahead, Karen.
It would also be that, you know, what's the timeline for the next phase? What's the comfort level? Where do we want to be when?
Well,
So
we
I think
plucked
that
these
a lot of that would
projects,
be-
When our debt
but
is
they're
zero,
part
that's
of the master plan too, right? I mean, we plucked these out because they were sort of the low-hanging fruit and but in reality, they are part of the master plan. So that I could easily see that group
Right.
dealing with this first set of projects as a sort of prequel, if you will, to the,
Right.
the
Yeah,
master
because I
plan.
actually see the finance committee being more involved after they kind of got a summary of what.
I don't
needs to be
disagree with
done.
that. I don't disagree with that.
And I think Belvia spoke to this in her portion of the public hearing presentation, and that they're right now, the plan for the bonds is to have a little bit of flexibility in a couple years so that the board can determine what they would like to do at that point. So that would probably be one of the more immediate needs for the finance working group is Or maybe that doesn't even need to go through that. Maybe the board needs to just think about that and come to that thought process, because I will have to relay that information to them fairly quickly so that they
Right.
can start preparing the documents. I'm not sure that we want to wait on the finance working group for that piece.
Right.
But
Are you talking about the second set of the issuance?
yes,
If we decide to do that?
if you decide to do that, because they will have to work on those documents very
I-
early, right in the next 6 weeks or so, to prepare for the closing.
But I also think based on the numbers and steady tax rate and all of those, I think the original information we got from Umball gives us a period of 2 to 3 years before
Right.
that has to be issued. So
Right, so
we've
if
got
that's,
time.
if that's where the board wants to stay, we will just need to know that so that we can relay that to them, because they don't know if the board wants to change that. If the board does not want to change that,
Change what? Just for
the timeline,
clarification.
the 2 years. So, in the presentation she provided there, you saw that the drop happens again in 2021, which means that in 2020, we would have to do some, of the work we've done this year to determine what 2021 would look like. And so it would provide that 1.5, 2 years to think about and plan.
In the context of the master plan, which is really
Correct.
the beauty of that.
Well,
Correct.
yeah, and not to belabor one particular committee, but to your point, yeah, I could see where the finance would look at, now we got monies coming in because of our level neutrality pension bond debt rolling off. Now we're gonna have a capital projects plan where we got $4 billion a year, we can start planning for capital projects. That's gonna change a lot of our thoughts.
Completely.
And
I agree with that.
and so I understand the need, but I
Okay,
also see
so
finance
let's
changing
get
as
to the
time goes on. so.
bottom line, which is really, we all need to be
Sync.
in sync. Absolutely. No, that's a good way to put
That's
it.
a bad, isn't
It
it?
is. Bye-bye.
I mean, does that make sense? I mean,
No,
I'm not
I get
trying-
it. I
I'm
get
not
it. And
trying
it's
to-
why, no, it's
I'm not
why
trying
we.
to limit anything.
No,
but-
it's why we brought up the retreat, but we also knew when we said that we were really tight on
and-
time,
And I
so.
think part of that is, and I don't disagree with Todd's statement that timeline affecting next school year is an issue, and I can understand. But to be able to have us to go through all of this, go through all of the project committees and have a resolution or a idea for it to be back to the board for approval by December
It's
is
huge. It's huge.
aggressive.
Yeah, it is aggressive. But, that's what we do. No. But, so in order, because I really, again, I'm speaking for myself at this point, but I really need us to be in sync and behind and involved and included. And so,
I think everybody wants us.
for us to do that, and given that we're tight, what does that look like? Could we squeeze something in quickly? Is there any way for us to do that?
I think, for me, I think we're gonna have to, because I need to know, if I'm gonna be a part of these committees, I need to know what direction the board wants to go in.
Okay.
And if I don't know what direction we wanna go in,
Okay.
then how can I effectively serve on these committees?
So to make it easier on you, we're gonna give you another meeting, it sounds like. So.
Do you guys all concur, though? I mean, is
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
If it's good
let's-
for Debbie.
Brad's always looking to help,
But I also think just us having the retreat and us having the one-on-one conversation
Right.
with Todd
It's good.
Right, okay.
with the master plan
Okay.
will help us.
So,
Absolutely.
but it doesn't have to be an all-day deal.
No.
We can be
No, we
efficient
can do it in
with
8 hours.
You might need 8 hours, but we're gonna work on you upgrading
We'll
that
start at 4 and we'll be
processor.
done at midnight.
We're gonna work on you upgrading your processor in the meantime. So,
You are so.
the question would be, I guess, is timing, and we can't kind of diddle around with,
Well,
we can't diddle around with calendars and all that sort of stuff. So what about the off Wednesday? Like,
Can we do next Wednesday? the
that's what I'm
22nd?
saying. What about the off Wednesday, the next Wednesday? What about that?
You're gone?
Oh, crud.
Are you here at all that week?
and let me mention something else as we're talking
you join by
about this. The master plan, or the items that we have in the master plan, as we already know, are broad and complex.
No question.
So some of the maybe part of things that would also help is if Todd could come up with or meet with this maybe there's part of that master plan that we address. Maybe instead of trying to approach this where we're doing it all at once, maybe if we can approach, okay, here's some of the critical stuff that we need to kind of, and see how that fits in the overall, and then maybe we can do this in pieces instead of all at once. That's just a thought. I don't, whether it sticks to the wall or not, that's the will
Yeah.
of what you guys want.
Yeah, and
But before we would do that, I would want to know from you guys what you want that to be.
right, and which parts.
So in other
So we
words-
need to start with our meeting then.
Yeah, because, for instance, grade configurations, well, I think we've heard often enough in all of our meetings over the last more than 12 months, that is a concern. And so I think we need to address that. But to your point, Jeff, we do need to look at, well, what are the costs that are associated with that? And if it's not cost effective, it can be, but then what else is coming off the books in order to make that happen? And so I think those are the things that, until we have this meeting then to get from you guys where you want to go next, or what issues you want to address, and it may be something that's not even on here.
Right, because, I mean, really, as far as some of the initial changes that we want to make, I realize in 2019, we won't have any of the, as of 2021 is the first year that we get the level neutrality is completely gone.
Completely, yes.
Yes, it's half gone in 2020 and it's completely gone in 2021. So, you know, and then if we have the ability of the $5 million bond that we can do in the period of the next, let's say, up to the next 2 years, because we wouldn't want to wait until the last minute. You know, maybe a lot of those things we could fund with a plan just between those two mechanisms before we have to even consider going outside of that.
We're definitely in a better position for that than we have been.
Well, we're in a great, we're in a
Yeah.
great position.
We're
I
coming
mean,
into a really good
And,
position.
and we have a lot to be thankful for, and I wish our community could understand that.
And it's
some
really,
do.
well, and some of us have more history than other too, and so for us to look back, like you and I've been on here a long time, Aaron, you've been here a long time, we can kind of go back and go, oh my gosh, we're amazing.
Well, I mean.
But it's
when you-
really hard
but
to,
when you put us in comparison with other school corporations in the state,
Yeah.
the trouble where they're having, you know, busing financial problems.
yeah, name it.
You
We-
know,
you know,
when
clearing
you do-
teachers out.
When you do the big picture look, you know, some could say low debt rate's bad, some could say it's good. In my opinion, it's a very good thing to have low debt rate, because it's made us much more flexible. But, with that being
But
said.
a lot of work went into making that so, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, and a lot of hard decisions and a lot of cursing. I mean, every time you close a building, I mean, we think about how many of those we've been through, and that's a
Received
really
a lot of nasty phone calls over the
hard
years.
thing to do. But because we did it when it was hard, we are in a better spot here. And so we need to celebrate that a bit. But now we have the opportunity to be creative going forward and catch up on some of the things that have been left behind in the process. And so I do think it's very important. So let's get to the bottom line of that, which is how do we fit this conversation in as quickly as possible?
So look at your calendars if you would. So what about the following week after next, which is Monday is the 27th? Would the 27th or 28th work? We have a board meeting the Wednesday the 29th or the 30th.
If there is any way for us to make one of those days work, guys, if we can move things or whatever, I mean, I'll move whatever I need to be available, so.
Why can't we just crunch the 29th meeting and have it afterward, or before?
That's really crunching. We've tried to do that in our, I mean, if that was our only option, I'm all in.
That's what I vote for.
Now, we're talking retreat and executive session, right?
And you have to have a facilitator. I mean, obviously, we
Understand
have to
that.
do it appropriately, clearly, but.
Yeah, I'm not saying we do it.
To John's point, we could intentionally make that board meeting as light as possible. Intentionally trying to get through that in 15, 20
And
minutes.
do it in the
Or
day.
move the board meeting up to 4 o'clock and then.
I mean, if it's a short, we have done the brief meeting, get the business taken care of that needs to be taken care of.
I like
and-
the idea of not trying
Another
to figure
day.
out another night, because that's the challenge to it all.
I think I'm kind of for that, guys. What do you think?
I mean, the
That does
Wednesday.
delay your start. You were hoping to maybe start some of these late in August, but at least it gets
Suzanne, you're
us.
talking about the 29th.
Correct.
Doesn't work for Debbie.
That one should be blocked already out on your day, on your
You guys good on the
calendar,
29th?
so.
Next Wednesday, the next board
We gotta
meeting
get
Wednesday?
you
It just depends on how long we stay.
What's that?
For me, it just depends on how long we stay.
Well, but we have to get the work done,
Oh,
and
thank
so the question will be, how can we make it just a business meeting and take care of the business we need to do? We have stuff we have to vote on, get it taken care of, and then get to,
Would it help
Get
if
to it.
I mean, I know Brad's out of town until 4:30, 4 o'clock.
I could get here by 4:15, 4:30.
So would it help if we moved our regular business meeting up to 4:30
I'm fine with that.
and then plan on an hour? You
Oh,
know,
no,
I
you're
may
gonna
ask a
be at
question or
this.
two, so it may be an hour and 15 minutes.
you're gonna be there, buddy.
I
Honestly, that's a day we have already set aside. If we're just going to do a very short meeting anyway, we have plenty of time to notify the public that might be interested.
So if we
I
have an
say
hour
let's make it
meeting,
work.
That gives us until 5:30 till.
And maybe we
9:30.
can keep the meeting even shorter than an hour. I mean, the last time we did this, we had a 15-minute, 20-minute business
Yeah,
meeting.
we'll keep it shorter than a half hour.
And then we
for
can.
sure.
then we can go.
As long as we don't have issues that need to be addressed.
Well, if we keep it to the business, which is a business meeting, so hopefully if we can keep it to the business and watch the agenda very carefully, so maybe you can get your questions answered ahead of time.
Set it.
Yeah, we're not
set it
gonna-
at 11:30.
August 29th.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
I'm thinking 9:30.
yeah, I mean, I really would like to put an end time on that.
So why don't we we'll start our regular meeting at 4:30, and then we'll advertise the executive executive session retreat. And we'll get with Ron to make sure that our language is correct on the advertisement until 9:30. We'll bring dinner in and do dinner here then in between, so that we don't have to worry about that beforehand.
I think that would be wise.
Okay.
I think it'll help us, if nothing else, we could create an outline that links the
Well, and
committees together with a responsibility, or not necessarily, we don't want to tell the committee what to come up with,
No.
but I do think we need to frame some
Well,
parameters.
when we did research for results, it was, okay, so we are looking at grade configuration. We need some research-based some research-based information so that we can make good decisions about that. And so I remember spending a lot of time working on research on different kinds of grade configuration. Then it went to a group that said, okay, given these possible options, this is what it would cost to do so, and this is what our capacity could handle. So it's just kind of giving those guidelines to working groups, I think, is what we're talking about, and making sure we have the right working groups with the right charge, right? Because we haven't written the plan.
Then I think-
This is to help us write the plan.
And then I think that'll be, then if Todd could, in the meantime, kind of in the back of his head, have some kind of,
For budget?
I'm gonna call it the term I use in my industry is critical task list.
Advertise for.
Mhm.
You know, maybe
Things
if
that should be accomplished by the working
You've
groups.
got a critical task list that in your mind has to be done by December 31st, then we also need to address those. Okay.
Yep, we
Yeah,
can do
because
that.
that's gonna be a timeline for the working groups as well, because, like, if you have to make this decision by the end of December, well, you can't just get your research to us by
And send it to the meeting.
December 1st. That has to happen sometime midterm so that he can
Because
do and we can do what we need to do.
Because then we could tell the committees, your start date is here, your end date is November 30th with a report, or your start date's here and your end
Yeah,
date
your-
is May 15th
Yeah, and your
next year.
midterm task list is this,
So-
so, yeah,
And maybe if there's a committee for the high school renovation, it could be an
That's gonna be an
18-month
ongoing,
project.
absolutely.
yeah, that's gonna be a while, for sure.
Sure.
So, okay, well,
Good, I
I
feel
think
good
that
about
was a
this.
good solution
Good, thank
to
you.
the dilemma, and,
I hope you guys agree with that,
no, I think,
you already
I
do.
think everyone was feeling like we needed the retreat, we just weren't sure what to do with it, like where to put it. So this was good to get us sort of started on that conversation, and gives us an idea of what you're thinking from working groups. It's a launching place,
Yeah, that's
so,
good.
and doing it on a day where we're already committed to be
I like that
together
even
is
better.
even better, I think, so thanks, John, appreciate
I
that.
lost extra money for that.
All right, thank you for that. And just, you know, do whatever you need to do to be there and be energetic and get an extra sleep the day before or something, because it's gonna be a long day, but
Dr. Reynolds will bring energy drinks for everyone.
go you.
No, we need you to
I
bring
thought he got
food.
that from his
like
Well,
extra
there will be food,
We'll bring food.
healthy
We
food,
will have food. Well,
No,
let's not get carried away.
brain
There's one
food,
thing to be ambitious, and then there's that.
Let's not get carried
Don't
away.
get carried away.
kale and,
No, there will be no kale.
So
You will be you will be voted off the
So you
island.
won't be at this meeting.
okay,
Spinach salad
That's right.
with
don't even try.
You're going out the
Next.
door with Suzanne.
So,
lobster.
okay, so our next agenda items are, is board reports and old business,
Yes.
and a little bit of an update since we delayed our meeting for the beginning of school. We did do it on the first day of school, which was a very good decision on our part.
Yes, thank you very much.
But how did it go?
It went very well. Our first day, the first week now, has gone very well. Our kids are doing a great job. Teachers, Bridget and I were at STAR today, doing super things in Richmond Community Schools, and the way that they have already jumped in, you would never know that they were just in the first week of classes. So they're doing amazing things. Our kids are doing great. What I'd like to do is I've asked Chuck and Rob both to just kind of give you just a brief, and I say brief, update as to the things that they've, it is not 18 pages there, Dr. Ernst.
That's my kind of brief, I like that.
Of what they've seen. Council workshop. Go ahead.
Yeah, I tell you, I'm really excited about, and I put it in my board update, just about the, as unfun as redrawing boundary lines was, it's nice to see those classes really levelized across the district. Smaller classes. It was nice to see an intended consequence, you know, of that process. And just to echo what Mr. Terrell said, it's really exciting to see kids coming and just like, you know, day one was just like any other day, you know, lots of hugs and smiles and right into it. So again, it was a great start to the year from my perspective.
Yeah, I agree. Very excited about the start with the transportation. That's the first time our kids see a school-related person as a bus driver usually, and transportation, they did an outstanding job, I thought. Given that we did those boundary line changes and always do that registration and enrollment right there at the right there at the end, but they did a great job, and hats off to Mrs. Darengowski and her staff and her drivers, and I love the way they communicate when they're out on the road and they help each other. We hear that on our two ways, so it's always friendly.
I
They
actually
help out.
took mine home for the first 3 days and just listened to them starting at 5:45.
Yep.
I was like, what in the world is that?
Yeah.
Just bus drivers. She
I
says,
leave
does that make
mine.
you anxious? And I said, well, I know they're handling it. And they do
Yeah.
a great job talking back. Can you cover me here? Can you get there? And boy, the work that they do with each other is applaudable.
Did a good job. I leave my two-way in the car, that way I don't have to leave it.
And it really doesn't matter what kind of changes you make. The first day is always a little bit
Oh, it's
chaotic, just because, you know, people are signing up late, or, you know, maybe it's the first time you've ever ridden a bus or whatever. And this year, actually, we heard a slowdown in the afternoon already. So by the second day, really, I thought the traffic had even decreased enough to where I didn't hire 6 people to answer phones.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
now, some went to voicemail, but, I mean, overall, it was
Yeah,
a
we
pretty
got very
quiet
few,
start.
so I appreciate that.
Again, certain level of chaos is expected.
I'd also like to commend the bus drivers as well, with all the chaos of the road construction in this community.
It's horrid.
It infuriates me. So I can't imagine driving the buses down some of these really small streets when the larger streets are being inundated with all this other stuff. So I
very
commend
hard.
them finding other ways around, you know, through all the smaller, narrow streets just to get around.
Sometimes the
It's
closures
amazing.
change from morning to
Yes,
afternoon,
they
and that
do.
makes it
I've
very
seen it
difficult.
happen.
Yeah.
But they still seem to get the kids and get them on time.
How many kids were affected with busing dilemmas this year?
With what?
Busing?
Busing situations
With
this year?
changes, or
Or just problems or anything like that?
I don't. I guess it depends what you consider problems.
I'm just curious, has any parents complained about communication issues between, whether it be power school and bus garage or bus garage and
There's
bus
always a little
drivers?
bit of that, and
So,
At the
yeah,
beginning of
there's
every
usually a
year.
delay on that request and then getting it into the bus boss and then making sure that the bus driver communicates back with the student and anybody else affected by that route change. It's usually, you know, it can take 3 to 5 days if it affects, you know, a 5-minute change on a pickup and so forth.
and
We-
for
we keep
example, where
track of-
you live, one extra kid that pops up changes everybody.
Could change
Well,
5 minutes.
I mean, I don't
Those are
care airing
interesting.
my laundry out, but, so this year, we've got a 4th grader and a kindergartner.
Mm-hmm.
Policy is you can't get off the bus unless you're in 2nd grade by yourself,
Correct.
right? I'm good with that,
Mhm.
okay, I'm not disputing that at all. My wife filled out the paper, filled it out online, everything with the bus. They showed us at the back-to-school night, everything was legit, that my youngest daughter was able to get off the bus with my 4th grader, all that good to go. And then, trying to think time frame here. I think Monday, or Wednesday, Thursday was okay, then Friday, I think it was, my wife just had an intuition to get home, and she pulled in the house and closed the garage and heard a honk outside. And she looked outside, saw the bus. She's like, okay. And then heard another honk, and she's like, I guess I better go out and get the bus. And the bus driver said, I'm glad you came out. I was getting ready to leave and take the kids back to the school.
Because she somehow didn't have the
Because she didn't
information.
have that paper. And I mean, she was upset. I didn't know how to take it. I wasn't sure what to do. But, you know, she talked to the bus driver and, she said everything was, gonna be taken care of Monday. I
Yeah,
think my
that's
wife called
probably
Monday too, so.
yeah, that's probably that one, and then like students registering after registration, those
Okay.
two things probably cause the most anxiety because they happen so quickly.
Right.
And
I
there's
was
just
inundated with
papers
curious about the
and
linkage
requests.
between the information either online or called in and how quickly it gets to the bus drivers and their routes and.
And it's mostly volume at that point, so that's probably the one thing that takes probably the most.
Yeah, I'm just curious about it, because it was just kind of frustrating, so.
Yeah,
We want to hear from that. I mean, the
absolutely.
parents and so forth, guardians, so, you know, they can feel free to call my office, 973-5400.
As a matter of fact, I can give you his cell.
My cell phone number.
Or definitely call out
No,
to
board
student
call,
transit
right?
either one.
Yeah,
It's just
so-
it's definitely
Yeah,
a
so-
volume issue at the very first 2 days of school,
Right.
for sure.
Overall, I think they did an outstanding job, but I
I've
appreciate
I've
the
not heard any, or
other ones, so.
rather, you know, like, speak out Richmond and
Yeah.
all that stuff, you're not seeing any negative stuff. So, I mean, that's always been good.
There was a little.
I also want to point out that on the second day, we started the the rollout of our laptops for our 5th through 12th graders, and rolled out about 1,300 laptops at the high school in about 90 minutes. Great volunteers, a lot of work from our technology department and helpers, and the students were excellent. The way we did it this year is we laid out their laptops in kind of alphabetical order based on different sequences and so forth, and let the students get their laptop. It took about 3 seconds for most of the kids to find their laptops, move down, inventory control, and then out. And then those that didn't get one or were new, we had a process for them as well. Worked great at Test and Dennis and our other
Great.
buildings, so I think we started out great, so. Just little hiccups, we'll take that, we can work on that.
And before you move on, I know I said brief, but could you also speak to a little bit of the increase we've seen in the breakfast
Oh, right.
participation at the high school?
Right, so one thing we want to do is make sure that as students get off the bus or dropped off, mainly, you know, at the high school, we saw, traditionally, the participation for breakfast at the high school has been pretty low. Students might get into the building a little bit later, or they want to go and socialize. So what we've done is a grab-and-go breakfast. So as they pass by the cafeteria, they can just grab a cold breakfast, eat that on the way to the class, and satisfy that need. The first few days, we had, I think, 98, 100 students participate in that. And,
More than what we had had
More
before.
than what we had, traditionally that go in and eat and so forth. So I'd like to commend, again, Maggie LaRue on that. Great idea, spur of the moment. She worked with Mr. Hensley at the high school and Mrs. Wolpe to make that happen. So that was a great idea, so.
That's good.
Good advantage to
Yeah.
That's good.
every
Well,
building.
that was the point of moving to this new level, was that more students would be able to take advantage of
Yeah,
it.
and that's what we want, so.
Good, thank you, Rob.
Very good.
Chuck?
All right,
Upcoming
anything
meetings?
else in that board reports section?
That's all I have there.
All right, preview of upcoming meetings.
So upcoming meetings, believe it or not, every night of the week, there are now athletic events going on. So please make sure you're checking that and keeping up on
Believe
that.
it or not.
Follow Mr. Weber. He provides great photos of those, and you can see those, everything from soccer to volleyball to golf and football. We appreciate all of that as well. And then I believe we've heard from most of you regarding the ISBA IAPSS Fall Conference, which is September 10th and 11th. If you have a change and you want to go, there's still time to get you registered. We'll be presenting on Tuesday of the conference this year, and actually taking some of our kids over to present at the conference as well, similar to the presentation we had last year about our tech groups and the kids. And you guys remember they were just incredibly impressive. So we're doing something that's really outside of the box for school board superintendent conference, and that is having kids come and actually present as well. So I'm really excited about what that's going to look like. And Mike Shunnison and Jeremy Hill are going to, along with myself, are going to present at, I think it's the 11 o'clock hour, but we'll let you know more information on that.
Very good.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay, we have set aside time every meeting for a news conference of sorts, and we never get any takers. So we're just going to take it off the agenda.
We can do
You are silly.
that. We don't have on the agenda, though, our celebration,
We don't.
but we need to. So, I recently received a letter from the Indiana School Board Association, and it said, "Dear Superintendent Terrell, it has been brought to our attention that school board members who reached CAP Level 1 since 2015 should have received an ISBA state pin to affix to their Level 1 pin. Please distribute the state pins included in the envelope to the following school board members." So tonight we're going to have a ceremony and pin Jeff Slifer.
Let's pin the tail on a donkey.
Level 1?
Hey, I didn't say that. But Susie Hively is also a part of this, and we will make sure that she receives her. We'll mail that to her along with a copy of the letter. So, Jeff, you
Get
got
it
to
all the
stand.
way in.
Do we need to have
Pin
music?
real close and tight.
And he had a sharp object in his hand.
I had to
What are you thinking?
Right? Let's all give Jeff a hand for his great achievement. Yay, Jeff.
Since 2015.
Jeff,
I know, right?
Jeff, would you show the pin? It's changed.
Oh, it's just a different color.
It's the same,
It was all red before, wasn't it?
I think, I'm not sure.
Picture of the state.
Anyway.
State is blue and ISBA is red now, I think. Yeah. So
congratulations.
congratulations.
That's because we're probably one of the 52 corporations that the P come on.
Well, maybe. Maybe.
So that's a good, is that your bell ringer?
That is my
if you
bell
will?
ringer.
You were the bell ringer,
Congratulations,
Jeff.
Jeff.
Good job.
Well,
All
in
right,
half
so
years,
with
I'll
that
probably
being
be a bell
said, we
ringer.
do have an executive session afterwards, but this meeting is adjourned. Don't forget to see the lady about signing the paper.